This is a presentation from the 2013 Cannabis World Summit. Please visit www.cannabisworldsummit.com for more great cannabis information, which is available to you completely for free. This information is being made available to you in part thanks to our sponsors. Please visit their websites to learn more about their excellent products and services. The following presentation is for informational purposes only. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Leaves of Hope Productions, Inc. Please note that regardless of any statements expressed or implied in the following presentation, that we do not condone you breaking any laws. We are not providing any legal, medical, or financial advice of any kind. No comments about cannabis being a cure for any medical use, expressed or implied, is to be taken as a claim or guarantee. None of the statements have been verified by the FDA of the United States, Health Canada, or the governing organizations of your particular country. And again, this information is being provided for informational purposes only, and the participants exercise their freedom of speech discussing what they believe to be true. We do not guarantee the accuracy of any information provided. It is your responsibility to evaluate the information before you choose to make any use of it. Please consult with a doctor knowledgeable about cannabis prior to using cannabis and or prior to discontinuing any medications you may be currently using. Please check with the laws of your country and region to determine whether you are legally permitted to use and or grow cannabis prior to any involvement with cannabis yourself. Even though we believe that cannabis ought to be legalized, we do not condone you violating any laws. Please review the legal disclaimers on the Cannabis World Summit website and only proceed to enjoy this presentation if you agree with all legal disclaimers, agree to hold the company, Leaves of Hope Productions, Inc., and the presenters harmless and are of legal age in your region. Thanks to Kevin MacLeod and Incompetech.com for the music used in this introduction.
So today I have Adam Assenberg on the line, and we have a lot of fascinating things to be discussing today. Adam's got quite a history about how he's come to cannabis. He's got an interesting story to share with you about that. He's been tossed out of his housing for legal medical marijuana usage. He's ran a dispensary, which of course is quite a fascinating subject in and of itself. I'd love to learn more about your experiences with that. And of course, got raided, and there's a lot of interesting experiences that Adam's gone through with that. He's had a radio talk show about marijuana, fact or fiction, which he's been running for 3 years out in Idaho, and he's now currently running for sheriff to be arresting DEA agents that are actually illegally harassing medical marijuana users. And we're going to talk a lot about that. That's sort of the key portion of the call, so that people will understand what it is that Adam's actually doing, running as a sheriff, why this is important, and perhaps inspiring people who are currently sheriffs to be doing their jobs according to what Adam is saying is appropriate to be doing for policing medical marijuana, and inspiring perhaps others of you to follow along in his footsteps, perhaps becoming sheriffs yourself with these ambitions in mind. So Adam, thank you so very much for agreeing to do this call today.
You're very welcome.
So, of course, Adam, you were telling me a little bit about how you got started with medical marijuana. Would you care to share, just so that people understand, how did you come to cannabis in the first place?
Well, I was wanting to become a L.A. police officer back in 1985-86 area, and I was a security guard during that time, guarding some dynamite on the job. Some people tried to steal it. I got in the way of the theft, and for my trouble, I was hit in the back with a baseball bat, thrown 15 feet off a bridge on the boulders, left for dead, ended up breaking 9 vertebrae from my neck down to my tailbone, paralyzed from the belly button down for 6.5 months, and took 7 years to get off a walker.
Wow. That's absolutely incredible. I'm sorry to hear that you've had to go through that. I can't imagine what that experience must have been like for you.
Well, it was tragic and very depressing for quite some time, but I look back at it now after discovering what I did about 2 years after I broke my back. I found out that they had caught 2 out of the 3 people that tried to kill me, and it was discovered in court that had they gotten a hold of the dynamite that day, it was destined to be used at a grade school in Los Angeles, California.
Oh, my God.
So anytime I get depressed about my broken back and the pain I live with, I look back at how many kids I may have saved that day.
Well, thank God for that, but I'm sorry that you had to essentially become a victim yourself in order to save so many others. But, of course, so that's led you to using cannabis. Was that for controlling the pain? Was there other benefits to the cannabis as well? Because I remember you were mentioning some seizures that resulted from that.
Yes, C7 at the base of my neck on the top and the bottom of the disc. The discs are protruding into my spinal column, blocking spinal fluid. And whenever that tries to push through, it pops like a bubble, and it causes my entire spinal column to inflame like you cannot believe. It feels like someone's poured gasoline on me and lit me on fire. But what it physically does, it puts me into what looks like a grand mal seizure where I flop around losing all control and black out from the pain anywhere from a few minutes on up to a half hour. And this can happen up to 70 times a day.
70 times a day. That's just unbelievable to think about that. So now the cannabis, has that actually helped you? Like using cannabis, did that reduce a significant amount of those? Did it eliminate them entirely? How did the cannabis help with the seizures?
When I have enough cannabis, I don't go through seizures. A friend of mine saw me going through hell that I was living with, even going through 500 milligrams of morphine a day and 60 milligrams of Percocet. I was still living with anywhere from 30 to 50 seizures a day. And this person said, hey, you've got to try this. And I said, what is it? And he said, it's a marijuana cigarette. And I said, oh, you mean a joint? And he said, yeah. And I said, hey, I've always been taught marijuana is a horrible thing, and I could not use it. And he said, would you rather suffer like you're doing now? I said, no. He said, well, try it. And I was at my last stroke at that point. And so I tried it. It got me out of the seizures. And ever since, I've been a sworn user of cannabis for the hell that I've had to live with my back.
And, of course, has it also helped with the pain of the back as well? Because I remember you were mentioning that you were on morphine and Percocet as well.
Exactly. I've been able to diminish my morphine use, and the cannabis has been able to prevent any side effects from the narcotic withdrawals. And it's been a wonder for me. If I have enough cannabis, I can totally get off the opiates altogether.
Now, explain what you mean by having enough cannabis, because, of course, I think that's an important thing that people understand, that when you have enough cannabis, you don't need any of these opiates. I remember you mentioned that. Is that correct?
That is correct. You have to understand that cannabis only reacts with the medical aspects for anywhere between an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then you have to go ahead and remedicate. Mm-hmm. And so I try to stay at a regulated dose of medicating every hour and a half to 2 hours so I can sustain my level to where I don't go into my seizures. If I am able to do that, I'm able to live pretty much a normal life.
Well, you know, it's actually astounding how many times I've heard people say essentially what you've just said is that by using cannabis, they're able to be normal. You just said you're able to lead pretty much a normal life, and it's fascinating to think that so many people are using cannabis just to become normal from whatever pains, epilepsy, or other problems that they're currently experiencing. But back to you specifically. So now, also another interesting thing, you mentioned that when you have enough cannabis, you don't need these powerful opiate drugs that you were talking about. Can you just share, just so people have an understanding, how much morphine were you using, how much Percocet were you using at the peak of your usage of those drugs?
At the peak of my usage, I was using 500 milligrams of morphine a day, 60 milligrams of Percocet a day, as well as on my oxycodone, I was using 10 milligrams 5 times a day of that.
Now, I can't really relate to these numbers because I'm not really that familiar with these opiates and how many milligrams is a typical
That would
dose,
put an elephant down.
Really? Okay, so thank you for putting that in perspective. So you had a tremendous amount of opiates. And the reason why I'm poking on this question here is that you were also saying that when you have enough cannabis, meaning, of course, there's been times that you've had plenty of cannabis, times that, and we'll talk more about that later on in this interview because, of course, I know that you had a dispensary, so I presume at those times that you had plenty of cannabis. When you got raided, I'm sure you didn't have cannabis at your disposal. But but most people, they go through withdrawal hell, especially considering the amount of opiates that you are using. Can you just talk a little bit, when you were transitioning from the opiates to the cannabis, how did that experience go for you?
I had no narcotic withdrawal whatsoever with my use of cannabis as a block from the opiate withdrawal.
That's astounding to actually hear, because you understand why that's astounding, right? Because most people getting off opiates, it's an extremely difficult process, and the withdrawal is absolutely horrific. But, of course, a lot of people claim that cannabis is known as, quote-unquote, the gateway back drug, meaning that it can be utilized as a medicine to help people to cope with withdrawal symptoms and get over withdrawal symptoms of heavier substances such as the opiates, even nicotine, and many other very addictive drugs. Would you say that that's true from your experience?
Well, I know firsthand from a personal experience because I had a friend who was using heroin, and that person, I got talked into using cannabis, and that person is no longer using heroin.
Really? So just by using cannabis, they were able to transition from heroin to cannabis?
Yes.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic. Like, the implications of that are just astounding. Now, why, in your opinion, now I realize this is more just an opinion-based question, but why aren't more medical treatments for withdrawals of heavy opiate users? Why aren't we using cannabis instead of some of these other pharmaceuticals that have their own problems associated with them? Why not use something like cannabis to get off the opiates?
Well, if you look up a drug called dronabinol, it's a synthetic marijuana pill, which is just a man-made oil-based synthetic THC pill. And that pill has caused deaths in the U.S., and that pill costs taxpayers $1,700 a month. So why go ahead and use cannabis, which is non-lethal, when they can go ahead and keep making all the money off of man-made opiates and man-made marijuana pills? It's
kind of funny, actually. I understand, of course, your comment is completely sarcastic, but it's just it never ceases to amaze me how often profits trump human life in so many instances, particularly revolving around cannabis, but in so many other fields of interest as well. But so what you're saying is that because cannabis is essentially a drug that can't be patented, they can't make money from it, they would rather have something that they can charge taxpayers $1,700 or more a month because obviously they can't get away with charging those types of outrageous prices with something that's far safer and more effective just by using a simple plant. I realize I'm just sort of paraphrasing what you're saying there, but now you've, of course, had oscillations in times where you've had a lot of cannabis and times that you've not had a lot of cannabis. You were able to sort of use, of course, the opiates to get back onto them when you didn't have the cannabis. Did you find that what kind of contrast would you find between the times that you were using cannabis versus the times that you were using the opiate pills? Which would you find more effective for treating your symptoms, and which did you prefer and why?
Oh, hands down the cannabis, because with the cannabis, when I have enough, I don't go through the seizures, whereas when I'm stuck using more of the opiates, I have maybe 1 or 2 seizures a week. And why even have one of them when every time you feel like one, it feels like someone's poured gasoline on you and lit you on fire? Why would anyone want to have to live with that even one time a week or one time in their life?
So now, of course, why did they take away the cannabis? Now, I know that was that as a result of your dispensary getting raided, or were there?
That is correct.
Okay, we'll get back to that in a little bit here. We'll talk about the dispensary and all. But before we do that, of course, you wanted to talk about that you were tossed out of your housing for illegal medical marijuana usage. Can you share what's the story? What happened there? What?
Well, what happened is I met this wonderful lady and her 2 children over the internet. And we got together, and the Anacortes Housing Authority in Anacortes, Washington, gets federal subsidies. I gave them my paperwork because it was time for my soon-to-be wife's yearly inspection. And the Anacortes Housing Authority says since we get federal subsidies, we don't have to honor state law. We don't care what your doctor has to say. You, your soon-to-be wife, and her children are to be living on the street. We will no longer allow you to live here.
And so were you actually kicked out, or?
We were actually kicked out. I fought it in both state court, and once I went to federal court with it, since I did not have $550 for a filing fee, they ruled against me and would not accept my poverty paperwork. And so I never got a chance to have my case heard before a jury.
How long ago was this?
This happened roughly about 7 years ago now. And it's a good thing it did, because while we were living in a tent in Pullman, Washington, I went to the library quite a bit to research the difference between state and federal marijuana laws, and found several discrepancies in both state and federal laws.
Okay, can you share how was that information useful to you to find those discrepancies?
Well, because it gave me a game plan as to how to fight the government back on the wrongful way that my family was treated over the legal medical use of cannabis. I discovered that both under state laws, my rights were being violated, and I discovered that in 2002, the Department of Congress in Washington, D.C., had actually rewritten the federal narcotics laws for the United States, and I found that the DEA and the FDA have been superseding their authority as stipulated by Congress on the guidelines Congress had put forth.
So were you able to use that information somehow to get back into the housing, or?
No, I was not able to use that information to get back into the housing, but we did go ahead and finally move into Colfax, Washington, where the community here has been wonderful to us and very supportive.
That's wonderful.
Besides that, we have been battling medical cannabis issues ever since with the state of Washington on the housing issue, and I had found that the only way to really make this argument count is to go directly against the FDA and the DEA for violating their guidelines set forth by Congress under 21 U.S.C. Section 812 of Federal Code.
And so would that sort of tie into why you're becoming a sheriff?
Most certainly, because of the fact that I believe that all laws are to be followed by the police departments and the DEA. They should not be creating their own guidelines of law as they seem fit.
Okay, well, now, remember, ladies and gentlemen listening to this interview here, that, of course, one of the primary focuses of what we're going to be talking about is, of course, Adam's running for sheriff, and so we're going to be talking more about that a little bit later on in the call, but I think that it's important for you to remember this discussion here because, of course, obviously we'll be tying into what we'll be talking about later on. But let's just put a bookmark on that mentally for now. Can we talk about your dispensary? First of all, how did it get started? How did you get started with running a dispensary?
Well, it all started with my radio show I was doing at a KRFP 92.5 FM in Moscow, Idaho. I was a disc jockey there for 3 years, running a show called Marijuana Fact or Fiction out of an actual FM radio station, and got to meet a lot of interesting people. I got to meet not only a lot of police officers, but I got to meet a lot of patients and dispensary owners as well. And I had seen that a lot of police were harassing dispensary owners and patients. And I can see where a lot of patients were being harassed and ripped off from quite a few of the dispensaries. And so I decided after doing 3 years of a radio show that I could better help the public by actually opening up a dispensary myself and showing the other people how one should really be ran. So I opened it up under the name of Compassion for Patients. And for me, it really was about the compassion. When I helped people, it didn't matter whether or not they had money. If they were a legal patient under the guidelines of the state law, I saw to it that they had medicine.
Well, you know, that's really admirable. Thank you very much for, I'm sure you helped a lot of people who, of course, not everybody can afford cannabis, especially thanks to the prohibition, the outrageous prices that causes. But I'm sure you must have tons of stories of people who have been absolutely touched by your generosity in helping them out to get the medicine that they require.
Well, I wish I could say I had tons. I have always had a very small operation going because I've always wanted to stay under the federal guidelines of 100 plants. And, you know, I never wanted to raise the ire of the DEA or anything that way. So I've been careful.
Okay. Well, it's probably a smart thing to do. I mean, what's the point of getting arrested if you can avoid it? But of course, down the road, you eventually did become arrested, or you did have a run-in with the DA. What happened? Like, did you overstep your bounds, or did they just decide to crack down on you regardless? What was the reason? How did it happen that the DA came down upon your dispensary?
Well, I decided that I have become well-known enough out there over the fact that I don't care about money, that I would help people whether or not they had it, to where it was time to really make a statement to the police about this. I was hoping that the DEA would arrest me so that way I could finally bring my argument to federal court about how the DEA has been superseding their authority as stipulated by Congress. And unfortunately, it was the Quad City Drug Task Force that raided me instead under Brett Myers, our current sheriff here. And when he raided me back in 2011, it was on May 4th. I was on my way to the doctor's office, and they pulled me over and told me I was being arrested for dispensing medicine. And like I say, I was very apparent about what I was doing because I was using a 1976 ambulance to deliver medicine. And I was advertised in all the local papers. I advertised in the local barbershop quartet newspaper. I did everything I could to let people know I was out there and I was ready to help them. So I wasn't hiding. I was in plain view about running a medical cannabis dispensary at the time.
I see. Okay. Now, so basically you were doing everything by the books as much as you could do by the books, understanding, of course, there was, I'm sure, a lot of discrepancies between federal and state laws, and of course there's a lot of other nonsense there as well. But you were doing the best that you could to stay squeaky clean. Of course, you were admirable. I mean, you were even driving around an ambulance dispensing the medicine. So it's, I'm sure, like you were alluding to the fact that there were other dispensaries that were perhaps not running their businesses as you had envisioned would be appropriate for compassionate care of patients. I would imagine probably these are just quasi-legal drug dealing dispensaries. Would that be sort of a fair assessment of some of the other, not necessarily all, but some of the other dispensaries at the time?
Well, out of a couple of them that I volunteered at, one of them was using a spray bottle to spray down the medicine to make it weigh more. And another person had gotten in some moldy medicine from a grower, and since they already paid for it, they still went ahead and dispensed it out to patients.
Well, wasn't there a court case where just recently out in Washington State somebody got harmed by smoking some moldy buds, and that created a whole kerfuffle as well. Perhaps can you just mention what would be the dangers of smoking or consuming moldy cannabis, and why dispensaries should definitely be not doing that? For their customers, making sure that they're providing safe medicine for their customers. Well,
there are still a lot of patients today that smoke cannabis the old-fashioned way out of a pipe and use a lighter. And for those patients that do, that have lung problems, if you're going to get a hold of moldy medicine, those spores are going to get inside those compromised lungs, and you're going to have nothing but problems.
Now, there's, of course, things that can be done to help save some moldy buds. For those of you who are listening on this call, we'll, somewhere else in the summit, we're going to be discussing water curing buds, which can actually help with moldy buds. Now, that's a whole other discussion. I don't want to get into that right now, but just pointing out that if that's a problem that you're facing, that there are some potential solutions. However, it'd still be best to avoid smoking it, as, of course, Adam, you just pointed out, inhaling the spores is not a good thing for the lungs, but we'll get into that further. But you've been doing everything by the best that you could on the books. Now, what was ultimately the reason or justification that they used for cracking down on that fateful May the 4th day for you?
They said that I had went ahead and sold medicine to an undercover agent. And one of my arguments to that is in Washington State we have RCW 6950403C, which says that it is a Class C felony to get a controlled substance under false pretenses. So if they had an undercover agent come to me with paperwork that I verified with the doctor to verify it was legal paperwork, and then I double-checked with the health department to verify that doctor was in good standings with the health department, I then helped that patient who was the undercover officer. That officer clearly, at that point in time, is in violation of that RCW code that they swore that they're supposed to uphold.
Okay, now hold on a second, Adam. This just sounds a little bit ridiculous. And I'm not saying this is ridiculous on you, but just about the whole situation from a legal perspective. So here you're following the books. You're verifying that his documentation was actually signed by a doctor. To the best of your ability, you're doing everything that you know that you're supposed to. However, this presumed patient is actually an undercover cop, and so he's technically providing you forged or fake documents. But nonetheless, it is meant to be understood or presented as being legitimate medical documents that would entitle another user in the States to have legal access. Is that correct? That it would entitle a medical user to have legal access? So, and if that's the case, then how can they arrest you for essentially dispensing medicine to someone who you, from all your due diligence, would come back as cleared for having legal access to this medicine? I'm just trying to understand, because this is just a little bit baffling to the mind to think that you're doing something technically legal. Now, of course, I understand there's the discrepancies between state and federal laws, but you're following the books, and yet you're still busted despite...
It gets even better. Okay. It gets even better because when they created the warrant in front of the judge at the district court, they did not bother to tell the judge that I had a business license to run my business. They did not bother to tell the judge I was only dispensing to licensed legal patients that had a recommendation from their doctor for this medicine. They made it sound like I was selling to anyone on the street.
And of course you weren't. And that's ultimately, you went to court, you fought it, you won, right?
That is correct. And not only did I win, but I went back to court the following week to the Superior Court, and a judge issued an order for the sheriff to return all my cannabis to me.
Now, here's a question for you. Now, of course, you've obviously had your life seriously inconvenienced, and I'm sure your business was inconvenienced. And of course, while your business was shut down throughout this entire process, now I don't know how long this lasted. Can you just tell me quickly, how long did it last between the time that you got raided on May the 4th and until you got the all clear and all your cannabis returned? How long was that? I
was raided May 4th, 2011. And I got the case dismissed January 3rd of this year.
Okay, so that's like nearly 2.5 years later. Now the question is this, and I think I already know the answer, but I'm just going to ask the question anyways. Did you get compensated for the time that you were wrongfully put out of business, essentially, because you just said that they were essentially lying to the judges to get the warrants and everything like that. I'm just sort of paraphrasing using layman terminology here, but essentially the way they went about it was wrong, and that's why you won the court case and even had your cannabis returned. But were you in any way compensated for the disruption to your business and to the disruption of your life?
Not at this point, although I do have an attorney by the name of Douglas Phelps out in Spokane, Washington, and I have signed paperwork with him for a $6 million lawsuit against the Quad City Drug Task Force and Whitman County for the raid.
Wow. So, well, you know what, I wish you tremendous success with that because, you know what, of course, that I'm sure would go a long ways to helping you to do lots of good in this world with that kind of money. But really, the real reason that I'm happy to hear what you're just saying is because, of course, this would set a precedent for them, and they would be a little bit thinking twice before mindlessly going in and harassing others such as yourself. Is that fair to say? Well,
they didn't understand that I knew the law well enough to where I could beat them at their own game.
Uh-huh.
Because in Seattle, Washington, we have 130 dispensaries that operate on a daily basis. And under the Washington State Constitution, it clearly stipulates under Article 1, Section 12, you cannot give the people in Seattle a privilege you do not give to other communities, or else you're violating equal rights and equal immunities under the law. and Article 29 of the state constitution says the constitution is mandatory.
Now, of course, I'm actually really impressed throughout this conversation. You've been putting out, just rolling off your tongue eloquently, all these laws, these numbers, and of course, you know all the particular reference names and numbers for all these laws that you're referring to. So obviously you are knowledgeable about all these laws. Another speaker with the summit, actually Ryan from NOCC, he's one of the other people who for the summit. He actually is strongly advocating that people take the time to read their laws, to look for these loopholes. Now, he's a Canadian. He's found a lot of Canadian discrepancies, and of course, you mentioned earlier in this call that you found a lot of discrepancies in the states between your state and federal laws. Would you sort of agree with the statement that people should take the time to, perhaps watch a little bit less TV and just read their laws, get really familiar, to know their rights, and to perhaps understand cannabis-related laws better than the police and others for their own protection, and just to be able to be better activists? And what other benefits would you say that someone who takes the time to study the laws can possibly experience, or why should someone do that?
Well, I'll tell you, because if you decide to go ahead and go to any public speakings where there's any politicians that want to talk about issues, it is great to be able to ask them if they understand the ramifications of the laws that they are trying to enforce. And when you can quote the guidelines of the state laws and the state codes that go with them, and the politicians cannot do that, it really shows who knows more, the public or the politicians.
I really like that answer. I'm going to have to remember that, and perhaps also for next year I'm going to have to brush up on my law, because I'm always impressed with you and others who know the laws inside out, forward and backwards, and that I think is actually something to be admired. People like you who actually know their laws and, of course, can state them and stand up for your rights, because you can't stand up for your rights if you don't know what your rights are, right?
That is so correct. You could not say it more elegantly.
Well, thank you very much. Now, so of course you've ultimately had your cannabis returned, and now you're currently focusing on moving forward with another court case for the compensation, that $6 million that you were talking about. Is there anything else that you would like to share about that court case, or is that still in the works, and perhaps you don't want to give out your strategies and your hands on this call? Is there anything?
Well, it's still in the works, and really the strategy is twofold, because about $3.5 million is just for the raid itself, and the other $2.5 million is for violating my First Amendment rights under the U.S. Constitution of freedom of speech. Because when I was first raided, I wanted to go to a public county commissioners meeting and ask them, why is it that a public county sheriff can go ahead and use taxpayer dollars to try to circumvent voter initiatives like I-692, the Medical Marijuana Act that we voted for here. And I was given a letter back from the county commissioner saying that if I tried to ask that question at the public meeting, I would not be recognized and I would be arrested for trespass if I tried to ask that question.
And this is a public event that you have the right to go to. That is a
public event, county commissioners meeting.
And that's in violation of your freedom of speech. And
so that's why when he wrote me a letter and signed his name to it, that right there is all the evidence I need to show that, being a county commissioner, he used that authority to violate my rights under the U.S. Constitution.
Well, congratulations. I'm glad that you've actually were able to catch that, because I'm sure a lot of people might not have even realized the significance of that letter, and they probably just would have shut up and just stayed away. But good for you.
Well, when you live in a tent for a month homeless with two young children and going through seizures almost every night because of the cold, you learn at the library just how to fight back.
I guess they say necessity is the mother of invention, and I guess it's also the mother of all learning as well. have to learn what you need to learn in order to be able to do that fighting back that you said. Now, just going to switch gears a little bit here. You also mentioned that you had a radio show, which was KRFP 92.5 FM in Idaho, that you were running for 3 years, talking about marijuana. Can you just share a little bit about that experience? How did they get started? That, of course, you mentioned that you were a DJ there for a while, but can you share how did you get started with this particular program?
Well, it was great because what had happened was after we finally got into a little apartment here in Colfax, I started doing a podcast called Marijuana Fact or Fiction, and one of the people that was a DJ at the radio station got wind of what I was doing and wanted to interview me back to me. So I took the initiative. I'm always taking initiative on things that I do. I don't just sit back and wait for things to come to me.
Well, for what it's worth, if I can just interject here, you've come to me actually a couple of times in order to do this interview, and I have to say thank you very much for taking that initiative because I think your story is absolutely fantastic, and especially what we're going to be talking about later on is something that people really need to hear. So thank you for taking that initiative, and I commend you for that. So sorry for interrupting.
Well, thank you. So not a problem. So what happened was Lee Robertus, the station manager, answered the phone when I called back saying, hey, why haven't I been contacted back again yet? And Lee Robertus said, instead of just doing a one-time interview, why don't you come down to the station and I'll check you out on the equipment and you can do your own show each week down here. And so that's what I did. I went down there, got interviewed, was okayed on the equipment, and started doing my own show. I interviewed people from LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. I had Jack Cole, the leader at the time, on my show. I had many other speakers from LEAP. I had doctors talking about the human endocannabinoid system on my show. I had patients. I had dispensary owners and everybody else. And that was one of the things that really helped me during my raid is the fact that I learned when things like this happen, they like to try to claim paperwork never existed. And so I always learned to make copies off premises so that way if they try to claim that in a raid of mine, I'd be able to show evidence that they were lying, which is what I did in my case.
So were they not aware that you actually had a secondary copy of everything? And did they actually claim that you had no such documentation and then, of course, you produced it? Is that what actually
That is correct. They tried to claim that the undercover officer never signed one of my patient care provider forms.
Huh. Interesting. So, of course, when they lied, now, did anybody get busted from that? I mean, like, technically, that's perjury, isn't it? If you're in court and you lie like that, I mean, technically, isn't that something that you can go to jail for? I'm not exactly sure how the laws work on that respect, but my understanding is that's a bad thing to do.
Well, in the good old boys club of the justice system, when the district attorney lies to the judge about it, and the judge, in my case, just said, oh, well, we'll just discuss that with the jury. And, of course, they dismissed my case to where I never even had a jury. So the issue never really got to come up in an open jury.
And, of course, without an open jury, the dynamics of the court changes as well. But I guess we won't get into that too much at this point. But of course, when you have an open jury, I think it's a little bit more honest and fair when you have people of your peers that are evaluating you. But would you agree to that, or?
Not at all times, because they try to find people. First of all, I've sat in on enough court cases to where they try to find people that are sympathetic, and they try to get those people off the stand as quick as they can.
Of course, so they would stack the jury in their favor in that sense, but. Anyhow, now, of course, you were talking about with your radio show. You got to interview a lot of these people, and you learned a lot of things. Did that also help you to learn more about cannabis and make you even more solid in your convictions, or would you say that you were already pretty solid in your convictions, that you just were just sharing it with your radio show, or did you have some learning experiences from all the people that you've interviewed with?
About the only learning experience I had is about how crooked not only the justice system is, but how crooked some dispensaries are. There's many out there that are good, that really try to help people, but there are some bad eggs out there, too, that make it bad for the rest of us.
Okay, without mentioning any names, so as not to offend anybody. Well, you understand. Perhaps some people might have should be offended, but you understand what I'm saying. Without mentioning any names, can you just talk a little bit what are you referring to? Like, what kind of bad things were these dispensaries doing?
Well, I went ahead and volunteered at a total of 5 dispensaries.
Mm-hmm.
When in the training of my working with people in cannabis.
Okay.
And when I was doing this, I discovered 2 different dispensaries. One was spraying down the medicine to make it weigh more, and they were charging crazy prices to begin with. And then another person was selling moldy medicine.
Oh, that's right. We were talking about that earlier as well.
Yes. So those were the 2 things that were really bad issues with me, and I tried to go ahead and see to it that those kinds of things just did not take place.
Well, I commend you for that, for standing up for what's right, because if people were in the restaurant business trying to sell rotten tomatoes in your salad, obviously that wouldn't go over too well. I'm sure there's a lot of health code violations with that. Unfortunately, the cannabis industry is completely unregulated. Now, a double-edged sword here. Whenever there's regulations, then of course things can get complicated in numerous ways. I'm sure a lot of us don't want the government to stick their noses in cannabis because, of course, when they've stuck their noses in cannabis, they've done a lot of harm for us as opposed to any good. But perhaps it could be said that once things are legalized and somewhat regulated, it could be improved in the sense that patients, unfortunately, today, because of the unregulated market, they're getting poor quality medicines, moldy medicines, dangerous medicines. I've even heard numerous stories about people who are purchasing hemp oil preparations to cure their cancer or various other illnesses that they have. And, of course, there's a world of Charlotte who would be more than happy to sell you a few $1,000s worth of watered down, or not with water, but obviously other oils or other substances, essentially cheating you of medicine. And there's a lot of people who are consuming medicine thinking that they're going to get well, and of course they could get well if they were using cannabis, but unfortunately they're not using cannabis and they're not getting better, and so they're being cheated of their money, but they're also being cheated of their health, and I think that's just a really sad situation. So I guess there's a bit of an argument for the benefit of having a regulated industry here, but where's your thoughts? Perhaps I should ask this. Sorry for going off on a soapbox there, Adam, but what's your opinion if this was honestly regulated, not, of course, with the governments that we currently have and the policies that are currently in place, but if this was honestly regulated, do you think that would be a good thing for cannabis industry?
Well, I think if it's going to be regulated at all, it shouldn't be done at the legal level at all. It should be done through the health level, through basic health inspections like you would expect at a restaurant. You don't want like you said earlier, with the tomatoes, you don't want to serve a salad with moldy tomatoes or anything to your customers at a restaurant, no more than to have mold in the ice machine at the restaurant. You'd expect a restaurant to be clean you go to. Well, you expect your medicine to be clean when you get your medicine, too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess people need to be aware of how to inspect their cannabis. Perhaps that should be a feature that maybe I'll do for next year, how to evaluate the cannabis that you're getting to make sure that you're getting something that's safe and a quality product as well. But that'll be for another time. But, of course, you were mentioning that one of the dispensaries that you worked for was spraying down the cannabis so that, of course, it would weigh more so that they could charge more for essentially cheating you out of selling you less. But of course, that leads towards causing moldy buds because, of course, water on plant material, any plant material, it's not just cannabis, of course, sitting water will create molding situations. So was it that same dispensary that was spraying down their buds that were having the moldy bud problems, or was it a different one?
No, it was a different dispensary altogether.
Okay. All right. Well, anyhow, now let's just sort of talk about the sheriff thing, because, of course, that, I think, is an absolutely fantastic thing that you're doing. And, of course, for those of you who are interested, you can go to Adam's website, which is Adam4, that's a number 4, so Adam, ADAM, 4, sheriff.org. So, of course, you can see more about what he's doing. So what is it that you're doing for 2014? what is this process? Why are you running for sheriff, and what are you hoping to accomplish by doing that?
Well, one of the things I wanted to do in my court case once I beat everything was I wanted to find out, first of all, how much my court case cost the taxpayers of Washington State.
Okay.
And I discovered there's not a single government entity that keeps track of how many tax dollars are spent on these court cases. Another thing I wanted to go ahead and do is push the issue that the sheriff here in Whitman County violated my rights under state law to have that officer investigated.
Okay.
And I discovered that Brett Myers, being the sheriff of Whitman County, has just about as much power, almost, as someone who's in the White House.
Really? Can you explain
that they could actually,
how is that?
That is just the way the United States laws work, to where a sheriff power than an actual federal agent, to where if, for instance, another person was helping a medical cannabis patient and they were doing so under the guidelines of the state law and they were not violating any laws that I could find under state, I would go ahead and arrest that DEA agent for violating that person's rights that are guaranteed by state laws.
Of course, I'm not an American, so I don't really understand American laws all that well, although I'm sure it's in many respects similar to up here in Canada and many other countries as well. But from what I surmise, and just, even from what I see in TV, usually whenever a federal agent comes to a local sheriff town jurisdiction, usually there's a bit of a battle of egos, but generally speaking, it seems, at least in Hollywood movies and in TV shows at least, that it's the federal agents that trump the local police, sheriffs and deputies and so on and so forth. But what you're saying is actually completely the opposite of what I've been led to believe or would imagine.
That is, you are correct on that, because, see, here's the thing a lot of people don't understand is that the police departments, when they actually work with a federal DEA agent and they go ahead and bust someone who has a $500,000 home, a boat, ski jets, and motorcycle or whatever, if they go ahead and assist the federal agents, they get a huge amount of the proceeds back into that local justice department when they help the federal agencies. And by helping them, they are ignoring their oath of office to uphold all state laws as they are written.
Okay, so what you just said, I think that sounded pretty significant. Correct me if I'm wrong, but so they're ignoring the laws that they're supposed to be upholding, the state laws.
That is correct.
The sheriff's supposed to uphold the state laws. You said earlier that the sheriff is technically more powerful than DEA agents and a lot of other federal agents, and it's almost as powerful as White House staff. Now, perhaps you can elaborate what you mean by, or not staff, but agents. Perhaps you can elaborate upon that for clarity's sake. But bottom line is, from what I'm understanding, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding you here, that if a sheriff of a town, I presume, or a little local region, finds that the DEA is coming and harassing or disturbing medical marijuana users, dispensaries, or so on and so forth, as long as a sheriff, you recognize that they're following state laws, not paying attention to the federal laws, just the state laws, if in compliance with state law and the DEA agent obeying the federal law mandates are trying to, bust those people for whatever it is that they're doing, you can arrest the DEA agents for what they're doing. Am I understanding that correctly, that you can actually arrest the DEA agents because the state law trumps in your jurisdiction?
That is correct, because if you take a look at it, on January 22nd, 2002, in Washington State, in Washington, D.C., Congress had went ahead and rewritten the federal narcotic laws for the United States. Okay. And if someone were to get on the Internet and take a look at 21 U.S.C. Section 812, it stipulates there's only 3 things by Congress to where a drug is a Schedule I narcotic. And clearly under Section B, since cannabis has medical authority in 18 states plus the District of Columbia, it clearly violates subsection B because it says that the drug in question cannot have any current accepted medical use and treatment within the boundaries of the United States. And also subsection C from Congress stipulates that the drug has to be dangerous even under the guidelines of a doctor, and cannabis has never killed anyone in 5,000 years, so clearly 2 sections out of 3, cannabis does not qualify for a Schedule I narcotic as stipulated by Congress.
And it sounds to me that just by the way that you've explained it, it almost seems that the laws are invalidated by the fact that there's 18 states that are legally providing medical marijuana access, obviously implying that there's a medical value to this plant. So is that did I understand you correctly? Because I think I heard an implication there, but I just want to be explicit in this understanding. Is that technically invalidating that other law about it being Schedule I due to the technicality being provided for medicinal use in 18 states?
That is correct. It clearly should invalidate it, but yet the DEA and the FDA have not allowed it to be that way yet because they try to claim that there are treaties also that have to be recognized.
Okay, now are treaties, are we talking about the international treaties? Or
Correct, the international treaties. And if you take a look at who was in charge of the international treaties when they were first created, it was Harry Anslinger. And if anyone were to look up Harry Anslinger quotes on the Internet, they could see the types of horrific lies that he claimed were the cause of having cannabis to be created as Schedule I to begin with.
It never ceases to amaze me. Like I frequently share in discussions with people in person, or even a few people in the summit as well. The very first bit of propaganda that was started against cannabis. It's absolutely shocking, especially in this day and age. You know, when we're so racially aware. You know, not. You understand what I'm referring to, of course.
Well, I'm glad you said racially aware, if I may interject, because one of the things Harry Anslinger said was that there are 100,000 total marijuana smokers in the U.S., and most are Negroes, Hispanics, Filipinos, and entertainers. Mm-hmm. Their satanic music, jazz, and swing result from marijuana usage. This marijuana causes white women to seek sexual relations with Negroes and any others. This is a direct quote from Harry J. Anslinger, who from 1930 to 1962 was a U.S. representative to the United Nations Narcotics Commission.
You know, just as a sidebar, I just have to say I really admire the fact that you can memorize that quote. I'm going to have to memorize it because I try to quote it so often. I always bastardize it because I haven't memorized it. But it is such a valuable quote to be able to share for its shock value, but of course to convey to people that is literally the seed, the very start of the prohibition lies. Then, of course, that became invalidated. And then, of course, they had to come up with other lies to justify the prohibition. You know, and then, of course, it led to reefer madness, drives you insane, and of course, kills brain cells. Which I deal with that one quite regularly. Of course, it doesn't kill brain cells, and of course, the study the alleged study, it's actually been done, but it's completely. You of course understand that the way that they did that was, of course, to create the information that cannabis kills brain cells, whereas the fact that it doesn't, they asphyxiated these monkeys. That's a discussion for another time. But of course that just led to a whole series of lies that one after another, had to become squashed. People eventually realize that these are outright lies. And I keep on telling people that whatever negative thing that you believe about cannabis, you just have to sort of suspend your belief in those negative statements, because just about everything that we've believed to be negative about cannabis are just outright lies, unfortunately. But
here's one other one. Here's another outright lie. Anslinger also said that marijuana is an addictive drug which produces in its users insanity, criminality, and death. You know, I'm not insane. I think I have talked quite intelligently on this conversation.
Absolutely.
I am no crook, and, as far as I can tell, my heart's still beating, so I'm not dead yet.
So in the sense, you've just invalidated everything that he's pretty much ever said about cannabis. So
pretty much.
They had an agenda to smear the good name. They've even, of course, gave it another name. They've called it marijuana, which, of course, the proper term is cannabis, and marijuana is just a slang term that they've adopted to create a sense of fear and panic in people by using this alternate term. However, ironically, at the time, people knew cannabis as cannabis, and they knew it as hemp. But they had to use another word, marijuana, in order to drive fear in the hearts and minds of these people to make them go along with these insane prohibition laws. But anyhow, that's I'm sorry for going off on that tangent. You started off something that you were saying about the whole prohibition laws at the beginning there. I can't remember where we were going with this. Do you remember the thread that we were on before we sort of went off on this tangent?
Just about how our treaty system has been totally created by lies. First of all, they say that marijuana kills you, causes criminality and death. And when those lies don't work, then they try to fall back on the federal treaties that they have with other nations such as Canada and Europe and everywhere else. But it's all created out of the U.S. based on lies.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and the U.S. is hurting Canada, it's hurting Europe, it's hurting everyone else by the lies from the United States government.
Unfortunately, the U.S. did start it, and unfortunately also I think the U.S. has to end it, because the rest of the world, we definitely would like to end this insane prohibition. But I know, for example, in Canada some years ago, we wanted to have it legalized, but essentially as soon as we declared that, the U.S. was quick to threaten us with closing down borders and making other trade sanctions and other complications for us. So we quickly dropped all those ideas of legalization. But and of course, the same would hold true for many other countries as well. But I'm really delighted to see what's been going on in Colorado and Washington, because that is literally the seeds of change. The wheels of changes are turning, and of course, now other states are beginning to follow in the footsteps of legalization for recreational purposes as well. And once that sweeps across the nation, that will ultimately, of course, spill over into other countries as well, and then hopefully worldwide we'll finally see the end of this insane prohibition. But it started with the U.S., it has to end with you as well.
It will never change until we have law enforcement officers that recognize that they need to follow their oath of office that they take when they first try to go ahead and protect the citizens that pay them their money.
Okay, now one more quick thing here about the discrepancy between the federal agents and the state or the municipal. Technically, sheriff, would that be the municipal level?
That would be the municipal level, correct.
Okay. So now, just so that I'm clear here, because of course, recently, like over recent months, rather, there's been, of course, a lot of speculation and conjecture, because of course Washington D.C. hasn't exactly done too much. Obama hasn't done too much regarding the legalization in Colorado and Washington, and of course with the polls literally split down the middle so close, I think he's quite in a conundrum as to which side does he side on, because he's in the damned if you do, damned if you don't situation either. And I remember a few months ago when he was supposed to make his proclamation as to what the official stance of the federal government was going to be. I was absolutely amazed how he managed to pull off a politically neutral stance. He literally didn't do anything. I was quite surprised how he skillfully pulled that one off. But the point of the matter is this, is there's been a lot of people who have been implying that there could be or should be, or some people arguing that there shouldn't be, that of course the federal laws should trump the state laws. So of course when you have Colorado and Washington that are saying, hey, it's completely legal to grow your own plants, and particularly in Colorado, and of course smoke it up for, of course, medicinal purposes or recreational purposes, whatever you want, of course, as long as you're a legal consenting adult of age, it's legal to do so. But of course the federal laws are against that. Where does it really stand that can the states literally get away with this? doesn't the federal government have the right to overturn and trump the state level laws? Can you talk a little bit about that, just so that those of us in the rest of the world, and of course in the States as well, can understand a little bit more about this legal voodoo of how you can have two different, like the left hand not only not knowing what the right hand's doing, but disagreeing with each other, so to speak. How can you have this dichotomy that is completely diametrically opposed to each other, and yet who will win ultimately?
Well, let me tell you that I was born in 1960, and when I was growing up, I watched a lot of scholastic rock on TV that was very educational, that they really don't show on TV nowadays to educate our young. And when I was young, I discovered that laws are created by the people, by vote. Mm-hmm. Another way they're created is by Congress or by executive order by the president. And that of the DEA, the Justice Department, are supposed to follow the guidelines that those three situations put into play. They are not to be writing their own guidelines of law as they seem fit. Congress in 1972 had went ahead and rewrote the federal narcotic laws for the United States. It is said only three things have to exist, which we already talked about, for cannabis or any other drug to be a Schedule I narcotic. And I've shown on this interview how cannabis clearly violates two out of those three guidelines.
Okay, which is the third one that it adheres to? So if you said two out of
one that it does adhere to is the fact that the drug in question has to have the potential for abuse. And I'm sorry, but I'm a 2-pot-a-day coffee drinker. Coffee has a high potential for abuse.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Cigarettes has a potential for abuse as well, and yet it's legal.
Exactly. Alcohol. Take a look at how many people that kills every year, but yet that's legal.
It doesn't have any medicinal value. Like, seriously, I mean, I know that we can use alcohol as a base for tinctures to carry medicinal properties, but what medicinal properties does alcohol have? I mean, like, just
exactly.
I'm not saying that completely sarcastically. I'm asking that perhaps I'm unaware, but I'm sure there must be some medicinal value to alcohol. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a Schedule I drug in and of itself? Why isn't it a Schedule
take a look how it causes cirrhosis of the liver. Take a look at all the abuse it causes.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the domestic violence. I mean, how often have you heard of someone beating their wife up because they smoked up a little bit? But you hear it all the time with alcoholics, unfortunately. And it's very prevalent in our societies. But
see, a lot of people don't realize that at the federal level in the U.S., the FDA has said that for a drug to be taken off of a Schedule I guideline, it has to be able to be recreated entirely within laboratory conditions. You cannot do that no more so with a cannabis plant than you can with an oak leaf or with a human fetus. It's humanly impossible. So therefore, the FDA administratively has tacked something on that Congress had never stipulated, showing that the FDA has clearly superseded their authority as stipulated by Congress.
So now, just out of curiosity, I'm just going to ask one of my angel advocate questions. Of course, I use the term angel advocate as many people would use the term devil's advocate here. There's, of course, a lot of people in other realms who, of course, have been other forms of injustices. For example, many people claim that, for example, income taxes are illegal because now I'm not an expert on this subject, but I've heard people saying that income taxes were only meant to be a temporary thing for covering wartime efforts, and that income taxes are illegal, and so they get away without paying their taxes. Now, technically speaking, it sounds to me that there's a lot of invalidation here regarding these laws, these prohibition laws. I mean, technically speaking, you can actually argue your way out saying that these laws are invalidated, but you'd still go to jail.
Well, you wouldn't go to jail if you were able to have all those arguments in front of a jury.
So are you saying that by having a jury trial that you might be able to get away with it? But now, of course, that just implies other potential arguments there as well. That so you can have two people literally arrested for the exact same quote-unquote crime. Now, of course, I don't consider it a crime, but we'll just use the term for a crime of cannabis possession, let's just say. One could technically get away if he argues properly, and one could go to jail for an absurdly long time. How's that fair?
And it isn't fair, and that's the way our justice system is right now, and that's why, like you said earlier, is people need to educate themselves on these laws so they can clearly put forth a intellectual argument that they can show how the Justice Department has violated the rights of the people.
I wonder how much longer we're going to have to keep on fighting this insane, because it seems to me it's already won. Like, Adam, would you agree with me in a sense? Like, we keep on hearing many people say over and over that the war on drugs is a complete failure. I mean, there's so many justifications against it. I mean, there's so many government reports even that recommend throughout the decades as well that these reports recommend that cannabis should be legalized because, of course, they don't find any of the problems with it. It's just literally just the will of the politicians and corporations, not what's scientific and ethically right to do. That's trumping here. Again, profits are more important than people here, is what this is implying. What do we have to do to end this? I mean, it seems to me that we have evidence is on our side, logic is on our side, science is on our side, morals is on our side. I mean, like, everything is on our side except for the profits. But, I mean, that could technically be there too. But what else do we have to do in order to end this insanity? I mean, it seems that we're holding on to arcane laws that are proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that these are wrong. Yet
we need to do two things. We need to, first of all, educate ourselves so that way we know how to stand up for our rights. Mm-hmm. And the second thing we need to do is to have people like myself run for sheriff, run for constable, or whatever the authority is in your different state or country, mm-hmm. and stand up and protect the rights of the citizens and not let greed interfere with what you are really supposed to be there for, is the rights of those citizens.
Now,
You're not supposed to be nursemaiding them and telling them what to do with their lives as long as they are not harming others.
Not everybody would necessarily be able to run for sheriff. I mean, I'm sure there must be some kind of qualifications or something along those lines to be able to be a sheriff or a politician. Is there? Can anybody become a sheriff? Can anybody run for being a sheriff? How does that work?
In the U.S., in the USA, the run for sheriff, all you have to do is be voted in by the people.
All right. And how often does that happen? Is it something like a 4-year election process? How does that work?
Yes, it is. Here where I live at, it is every 4 years.
Okay. So now the incumbent, is that the same sheriff that I remember earlier in this conversation? You were talking about you wanting to put that particular sheriff into justice for essentially the wrongs that he's done to you in the past. Is that the same sheriff that's currently in office or in power?
Yes, Brett Myers is currently in office right now, and I want to go ahead and take the job away from him and properly serve the people of this community.
So now, just out of curiosity, so like how is that going to go? Like obviously he's the incumbent, and usually incumbents have an upper hand, an advantage in that sense. Are you getting a lot of support from your community on the local level? How is this election process going for you? Now, of course, I realize that this is 2014, so it's still early, but of course, it's never too early to start building those relationships and all. What's the response that you're getting from the community currently?
Oh, anytime I walk into the local grocery store, I always hear someone going jokingly, "Hey, Sheriff, how you doing?" And people pat me on my back and tell me I am putting up a great fight, and they hope they see me really pull this off. I've had people walk up to me when I'm just walking down the street and tell me I'm doing a good thing. It's just been beautiful. I couldn't have better support as far as people wanting to vote for me. I've already spoken at the Washington State University campus to the sensible drug policy people down there, and I had a wonderful turnout there. And it really looks like I'm going to win this. Even though I am working on next to a shoestring budget, I'm still going to pull this off, it looks like. And some of the things that are really getting people interested is some of the things I want to do besides the medical marijuana issue. I want to bring in 2 people from the general community, have them look over the daily operating routines of the Sheriff's Department to make sure that other citizens' rights are not being violated on anything else that the Sheriff's Department does as far as any brutality or anything else goes. Another thing I want to do is go ahead and have a public meeting once a month to find out about any drug houses or any gang activity or anything else we may not know about, so we can jump on it before it becomes a major problem in that community, and also to give the community input as to what we are doing better to serve them. Another thing I want to do, which I talked about briefly earlier, is that when citizens are being investigated through the Justice Department, there is no tracking as to how many taxpayer dollars are being spent on investigations. And I would see to it that every dime of taxpayer dollars was accounted for and take some money out of the drug unit, put it back into the criminal unit, and get some of these crooks off the streets that need to be taken off.
Absolutely. Can you just give us a ballpark guesstimate or estimate of how much money is being spent by the Justice Department persecuting and investigating and doing all these legal actions against cannabis users? Like how much money?
Well, I take a look at my case, and I figure about $500,000.
$500,000 of taxpayers' money was wasted pursuing you wrongfully. And, of course, all your cannabis was returned. And, of course, now you're countersuing the government or working your way to doing that. But, of course, so that's just one particular case. But there's, well, I have no idea how many cases there are throughout the United States. It's half of what I know is, of course, that half of your prison population is being filled by nonviolent drug offenses. Most of them are cannabis-related. And how much money is being spent, like that must be billions of dollars every year that the government is paying of taxpayer dollars to support what most people don't want.
Well, here's the real kicker that you're going to love that I saved for last.
Okay.
Is that if I go ahead and win this lawsuit of the $6 million, I plan on taking a good chunk of money and going after the FDA and the DEA in federal court on the issue of them superseding their authority as stipulated by Congress. Once I take that to court, get that in front of a jury with money behind me and a good lawyer, I will be able to win that. And once that is won, anyone that has been attacked since 2002 could then turn around and have their day heard in court for having their rights violated by the Justice Department.
Well, I guess there's one good silver lining on behalf of all the lawyers in the Justice Department is if that were to happen, they'd have to hire a lot more lawyers and judges to handle all those court cases.
Most certainly, but just think how taxpayers will be able to get their money back for the ones that have been harassed.
Now, I'm only just saying that as a bit of a joke because, of course, one of the things is that a lot of these industries, for example, the law enforcement industries, the legal industry, of course, a lot of people mention that it's in their best interest to maintain the prohibition because the prohibition is their bread and butter.
Why do you think that my kind of arguments have never been argued in court before?
Because it would actually not violate, but jeopardize their livelihoods.
Exactly.
Well,
and that's why I did the research myself.
Obviously, you have to do the research yourself, and that reminds me of Ryan from NOCC, who's one of the speakers. He actually mentioned to me, I can't remember if this was during the interview or if this was actually outside of the confines of the interview portion of the call, but he pretty much said the same thing, that, or what his recommendation is. Of course, when you go to court, you have to have a lawyer because they know the system, but you should study the law yourself, and you should pretty much tell the lawyer what you want the lawyer to do. Of course, you're paying the lawyer. You should get the lawyer to argue the way that you want to. But unfortunately, in his experience, actually, he ended up learning the laws, and much better than most of these lawyers, because most of these lawyers don't know these laws. They may be fighting on your behalf, but they're not necessarily doing the best job because they don't know all the ins and outs and all the loopholes and all the arguments that they could be doing. But if, as you yourself have said, you used to go to the library all the time when you were living in that tent because you had the necessity to win. You had to fight. And so, of course, when your life is on the line, if you can go to jail, that's a good opportunity to really study the law. And who else is going to have your best interest in heart? Yourself, I guess. You have to make sure you know the laws inside and out, right?
That is correct.
Well, okay, so now going back to the sheriff thing, so of course I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with everything that you're doing. Of course, we're still a year away. When is the election? What month is that going to be happening next year?
That is going to be happening in November of 2014.
November of 2014. Okay, so we're a little bit more than a year away, about a year and a half actually. So I'm really hopeful that you'll continue with your campaign to do that well. But I would surmise, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but just the process of what you're doing, just your running. Of course, I'm sure that's an embarrassment to the incumbent guy already because of your friction that you have with him. I'm sure he might be a little bit concerned about you. But it seems to me that you're also raising a lot of good issues about other things as well. That you're doing a public service. Now, of course, I'm very optimistic and I'm hopeful that you're going to be winning, and you're saying that it looks like it's going to go that way for you. But even if you weren't to win. What I'm saying is that even if you weren't to win, would it be fair to say that you've done a lot of good of raising awareness just by the running process in itself? And the reason why I'm saying that is perhaps others might be inspired to run as sheriffs, not necessarily with the full intention of winning, but at least the opportunity to, in the process of running for this position, that they can be raising awareness of real issues. Is that a valid statement to make? Is that a valid reason why people might want to pursue running for these positions of power and office, even if they lose, they still come out as winners?
That is true, because even if you don't win, some of the things you're trying to get accomplished, like my monthly meetings with the public to find out about problems within the community, if things like that were to be accomplished, it'd be a win right there alone.
Mm-hmm. So let's just say someone in the States, I presume, is interested in becoming a sheriff or following your footsteps. How can they learn to do what you're doing? How can they to find out more? Can they go to your website? Can they talk to you directly? How can they learn what they need to learn in order to be able to pursue this opportunity as you're doing?
Well, they can go to my website, like you mentioned earlier before, Adam4sheriff.org, or they can call me directly at 509-288-4799, and I'm happy to talk to anyone and try to help anyone I can.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic. Obviously, you're a man of your passion and your convictions. You know a lot about all of these laws. As I've already mentioned a few times throughout this call, I've absolutely been impressed with how you know these inside out, forward and backward. You know them verbatim, and you're obviously very kind in helping. You've had compassionate dispensaries. You're doing a lot of great good things. You're running even for sheriff in order to do something beneficial in this world. So I think that, you know what, Adam, I want to say thank you so very much for everything that you're doing, because you are one of these passionate people who are actually taking a stand and making a significant contribution towards this the ending of this quagmire war that we're in, this war on drugs. And I think that more people need to sort of follow in your footsteps. Hopefully it doesn't take a broken back to get there, but I think that people should look up at you and sort of admire what you're doing and perhaps aspire to at least do some of what it is that you're doing. Do you have any sort of last-minute tips for these people, for activists, for anybody, for even the average person just listening to this who's not an activist or has never really spoken up for cannabis? Do you have any messages of what they can do to help?
Basically, even if cannabis isn't really what you're passionate about, you need to be passionate about something, because if not this, the government will take away your rights about something else. On my website, you will see how people get arrested for dancing. You'll see a person being shot while they were sitting in their car, and then the person videotaping it had their camera taken away at gunpoint from the officer. I mean, there's all kinds of atrocities that are on my website from law enforcement that is in office right now, and we need to change the way things are. We need to bring law enforcement back to where it serves the people instead of the corporations, and it will take people standing up for their rights to do this.
Well, I love what you just said, servicing the people as opposed to the corporations, because actually that can really be said about all levels of government, because that's what's really happening is we've got a corporocracy, not a democracy, particularly in the States, but I'm sure that actually that's completely true in Canada and many other countries as well. But there's another point that I was just going to say. Oh, my goodness, I can't remember what it is. I apologize. But I'm just drawing a blank here, actually. I had another point I just wanted to make. I apologize, Adam. I just completely drew a blank on what it is. But
not
anyhow,
a problem.
So, of course, a lot of people are taking a stand, doing what they can. Are there anything, other messages that you wanted to share with the world while we're still on this call together?
Just that I have been dead 3 times now and come back from the dead. I have a very unique stance on life. I don't believe in greed. I don't believe in corruption. I believe that we are all brothers and sisters on this planet. We cut ourselves. We all bleed red. We need to start thinking of each other that way.
Absolutely. We are people. We should be doing this together. Well, you know what, Adam, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. You've obviously got a wealth of information about the laws, about the everything that you're doing. You're doing a tremendous amount of good. Thank you very much for sharing, of course, your website, but also your personal phone number so that people can actually get in touch with you. I mean, you're a real person. You're actually out there to do good, and the fact that you're willing to provide people ways to connect with you, I think that's absolutely admirable. So, Adam, I look forward to seeing what actually happens with you next year. But of course, we'll be talking again, I'm sure, for next year's summit. I'd love to have you back to sort of get a progress of what you're doing with the sheriff, and of course your opinions on the laws. I'm sure that over the next 12 months, we're going to see a lot of changes, or at least I hope to see a lot of changes in the States. And of course, your comments would definitely be quite insightful with what's going on. And, of course, next year we're also going to be doing a tribute for Jack Harrer. And I understand that you've known this fabulous man, and so we're definitely going to be talking about him as well, because he's a great man, and, of course, I'd love to hear some of your stories that you have to share with him. So, Adam, thank you so very much again for doing this call and sharing your wisdom with us here today.
You're very welcome, and thank you for having me.